She is now Arizona Congresswoman-elect and could be the first female to join the Freedom Caucus. She joins me tomorrow. What Debbie Lesko wants to see out of Republicans and why she's so confident they'll do quite well. Hold on, Blue Wave. She doesn't think it's going to happen. Is she right? We'll ask her tomorrow. That'll do it here. The Dow finishing up about 60 points, even though interest rates are higher. The 5 is now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The 5. We begin with big breaking news. It's official. Kanye West turning Hollywood and the liberal music world upside down, pledging his full-throated support and love for President Trump. The rapper tweeting, "You don't have to agree with Trump, but the mob can't make me not love him. We are both dragon energy. He is my brother. I love everyone. I don't agree with everything anyone does. That's what makes us individuals, and we have the right to independent thought." He also tweeted a selfie and a MAGA hat. Well, as you can imagine, his support is appreciated by the president. Trump responding to the rapper on Twitter, writing, "Thank you, Kanye. Very cool." Sarah Sanders was even asked about it at the press briefing today. Seriously.
Kanye West has been in the news lately for supporting the president and expressing his admiration for the president.
Covering all range of topics today.
I'm curious whether the president has reached out to Kanye West and whether he'd be willing to meet with him at the White House.
I don't know of any conversation that they've had over the last week or so. I'll keep you posted if that changes anytime. Matthew? 2 weeks. Sorry, I know they met during the transition. That's the only meeting I'm aware of that's taken place or conversation before everybody has a meltdown.
And that's what we said on the show yesterday at over Trump Tower. Transition time, but needless to say, the internet freaking out over this with comments like, "I never needed a photo of Kanye with a MAGA hat on, and I still don't." And then Donald Trump and Kanye speaking over Twitter, "Welcome to 2018. So, does everyone believe this is legit, or is this the ultimate trolling going on? Greg, you have some answers, not all of them.
I know that this is actually a bigger deal than just what's happening on Twitter. It's a big deal because what you're seeing is a collapsing of a world of conventional assumptions where people are supposed to stay in their boxes. And if you get out of your box, there is generally an online mob that will come after you for your political beliefs or any beliefs. And what he's doing right now, which is kind of inspirational, and I actually do think it's a fairly big deal. It's bigger than the Roseanne thing. This guy has 18 million followers, and they watch E! And Bravo. This is a world that, like, it's a different world that he's reaching out to, and it's kind of heroic when I know personally musicians and actors and just regular people who are punished for offering a counter narrative, any kind of counter narrative, and he's basically standing up and he's saying, "I'll take the slings and arrows. I'm okay with it. I'm big enough." I returned to the Candace Owen thing when he defended her. He was supporting her not for ideas, but for her guts. And he was still targeted, which shows that there is a mob out there that wants to silence you if you leave your box. And what he's doing, and what a lot of people are doing, classical liberals from the Dave Rubins and the Sam Harrises and the Joe Rogans and the podcast world, they are leaving their boxes. And they're daring people to come with them. People are leaving the intellectual conformity, and he's I don't know, he's celebrating it. The tweets are a celebration, I think.
All right, well, fantastic. So, Dana, welcome back.
Thanks.
Yes,
you guys are going to have to catch me up on this story.
There's a family called the Kardashians.
Like, what has happened to the 5 in the last 3 days when I haven't been here? I think... Look, I have got a personal feeling about Kanye West, and what he said about George W. Bush during Katrina was outrageous, and maybe he wouldn't say that again today. But it was a terrible thing to do to somebody. And actually, what would have been really brave would have been going after the real culprits, as in the local and state government that did not help the African-American people of New Orleans.
Absolutely.
And so I'll just leave that there. I also think, in addition to all the things that Greg said, I think it's a great way to get publicity before your album comes out.
No, 100%. So that's is this?
I think I'm not saying that it's not real
or not genuine.
I think it can be both.
That the timing could be,
sure.
Auspicious.
I don't think he needs publicity for his albums.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
They sell pretty well on their own.
Jesse, also welcome back. You guys did a great job yesterday.
Thank you.
That organization.
Nice apron.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, all right, so what do you make of this? Because it's true. He was there. We showed the footage yesterday in the beginning part of the show that he was at Trump Tower. He was at transition. He was expressive then, welcoming a meeting with the president, and felt like he was, at the time, candidate Trump, but, felt that he was listening to his voice, wanted to talk and do outreach. There's nothing wrong with that. So what is this, an extension of it? Or is there something else going on, or combination?
I'm not as cynical as Dana. I'm a little more hopeful for Kanye. I think Kanye's matured since he said what he said about George W. Bush and Katrina, and I think he would agree now. The new loving Kanye would look back on that and probably not like that, because he also said he loves Hillary. And I think he's trying to lean forward with love and not say, if I like this person, it doesn't mean I hate their opponent. And I can't say it any better than Greg Gutfeld just said it. I think that was perfect. I think you can't underestimate what's going on here culturally and politically. And he's shattering the paradigm of us against them, of the tribes. We're all against each other. We hate each other. And it's a new phenomenon because people have not really expressed themselves like this. You've never seen someone at this level of a celebrity shock and awe the public to such an extent where people are going, what is happening? He must be mentally ill.
Yeah, that's what
he has said something that has blown people's minds. They actually think he needs to see a doctor. And remember, that's what they said about Trump, because he's got so much dragon blood or whatever. He sounds like Charlie Sheen.
Dragon energy.
Once in a while, people come along and they break the mold. Kanye's one of them. Donald Trump is one of them. He breaks the conventional wisdom. And
they're both
it's really
entrepreneurs and
refreshing
businessmen as well.
Yes, and let's also remember, Black Americans, not all of them, Black Americans liked Donald Trump before he became a politician. You've seen pictures of him. He was, in the boxing game. He was out, at nighttime taking lots of pictures with other celebrities. And people admired his entrepreneurship, his flashiness, his style and his wealth, and the women that he hung around with. And things changed when he became political, but he was admired for that by a lot of people in different communities. And now the fact that he's come out and, he's said some things that have angered people in the Black community, that doesn't mean you can't change as a person. Doesn't mean, you have to leave that person.
Sure.
But I think Trump has matured just as much as Kanye.
And by that you mean the wonderful, wives that he has had.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that are, oh my God, Ivana, Melania.
Yeah, I mean, he's a staple in, New York society for many, many years.
Yes. All right. Okay. So Juan, have you recovered from Jesse?
I'm trying my best. But I think this is such a superficial conversation because I think Kanye West is the same guy that, as Dana said, was insulting Republicans a minute ago in a way that I thought was unfair. And now he comes back, and I guess there's always going to be a market for people who say, well, but now he likes Trump, so we're going to rally to Kanye. Well, look, even his wife said, hey, Kanye, you don't agree with all of his policies. And the Kanye West said, yeah, that's true, but it doesn't matter because I also like Hillary, but it doesn't matter that I like somebody's policies. He's got the dragon energy or the drag whatever. And, it's just so silly at a time when in America, we've got black women on a golf course in Pennsylvania being the police called to get them off, or the Starbucks situation, or the young man who was shot in his grandmother's backyard in Sacramento. And instead of focusing on real issues impacting race in our country, we're focusing on Kanye West, who says it's not about anything of substance. It's just all of a sudden with a record coming out, he likes Donald Trump. So I guess all the Donald Trump folks now will go buy Kanye West records.
But I mean, that's the kind of response that Kanye expects, which is to dismiss his beliefs. This is what happens. If you step out of a box, somebody's going to accuse you of opportunism. They're going to bring up your past. They're going to tell you that you're probably just some kind of, marketer. That's what happens. He knows that.
Well, I'm not
saying care.
I think your analysis is way off here. This is not about stepping out of a box.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is if this guy was like Supreme Court Justice Thomas, if he was Tom Sowell, if he was someone who was making
He's only 40.
Let me just finish.
Then his opinion
if he
would
was
count?
someone who was making a substantive argument about how Donald Trump, in fact, is a beneficial force in American life, especially in terms of black people, and that black people haven't all been brainwashed.
But you have a quarrel with what he said because you don't like the way he said it. He's entitled, like everybody at this table is entitled to their individual opinion.
Kimberly. The argument is that he has no argument.
So he may not be Thomas Sowell, but he still is somebody who's an entrepreneur and somebody who's been very successful.
That's fine.
In the black
that
community
has nothing to do with suddenly he's now a fan of Donald Trump. Where'd this come from?
Well, what I'm saying is he's entitled to his opinion.
Sure.
What difference does it make?
We thought it was great when Roseanne did it. Now we don't.
I think it's less about Donald Trump, and it's more about with the Candace Owens thing. He's celebrating people for being independent thinkers.
Right.
You expect someone like Candace Owens, from her demographic, young black female in America, to think the way a lot of other young black female in America think about Donald Trump, and that's usually about 90% one way. He's celebrating her bravery. He's celebrating her independence of thought and stepping out of the box and standing up to the mob who comes after her for saying something that a lot of people in her group don't believe in. So it's just more about groupthink and breaking through that and celebrating people's individuality and expression.
This is what Gregory was saying. But what I'm saying to you is it's not about groupthink. If Candace Owens or Kanye want to make an argument, I'm glad to hear it. But that's not what they're saying. What they're saying, I mean, it's like John Legend today tweeted out this thing about stop calling the cops, will you, on black people. And then everybody says, oh, that's a racist comment because blacks have a higher crime, et cetera. But you stop and think about it, Jesse. If you and I are walking down the street and some cop stops beating me in the head, you're going to say, wait a second, why are you hitting Juan?
I understand that argument, but I also think this is not about policy.
And they know you, Juan. I mean, come on.
This isn't just about policy.
By the way, the New York cops
are
a minority force.
Yeah, listen, it's just let people have their own opinions and their viewpoints. It what makes this country diverse, and it shouldn't matter what skin color you have. You shouldn't adopt a certain ideology or philosophy and then be criticized and bashed by other people. I think it's very unfair. The Supreme Court appears to be set to hand Trump a big win on his travel ban. That big decision next on The Five.
Welcome back. A constitutional challenge to President Trump's travel ban now in the hands of the Supreme Court. The justice blocked by lower courts and withdrawn. The second was allowed to take partial effect but expected to expire in September. The administration appears likely to win this case with a conservative majority on the high court. Here were some arguments on both sides.
Where does a president get the authority to do more than Congress has already decided is adequate?
If you look at what was done, it does not look at all like a Muslim ban. There are other justifications that jump out as to why these particular countries were put on the list.
Kimberly, it sounded like they were getting to the nub of the issue, especially in terms of the war powers that are the presidential powers, but also this issue that it doesn't look very targeted if only 8% of Muslims in the world would be targeted under this particular ban. So Kennedy looks like he's going to be the swing vote.
Yeah,
nobody knows.
I think that people are spinning it on both sides, obviously, as they're wont to do in terms of their different ideological differences. But I don't think this is actually a problem at all for the president and for his policies. I actually think he has a very good opportunity and chance here to prevail on the merits because of the way that it was tailored and the redrafting and the way that they posited it, that actually this is something that could go through. That it isn't onerous, that it isn't, that it doesn't discriminate, and that it is reasonable, and it also is in keeping with national security interests and the president's right and accord to be able to oversee that and put in steps that he thinks are important for public safety and national security.
Well, and I think it's important for people to remember that the original travel ban that got all the attention and all the protests, it was withdrawn, and then a more targeted, narrow one was put in its place, and that's what they're arguing about today.
In fact, this is the third version, I believe, and so you've got this now, what is it, 14 months or so into the administration since the first one was put in place. And in this one, you also have North Korea and Venezuela included, I think purposely to signal that this is not about a Muslim ban, this is about national security.
Well, maybe because that is an actual interest and versus prophylactic.
Okay, and so, but the counter argument that came from the former acting Solicitor General, Neil Keitel, today, when he was arguing was that the administration has not demonstrated exactly how the people from these countries would be a threat to our national security. And that, in fact, he believes that the travel ban is generated by the president's animus towards Muslims. Now, it was interesting because then Elena Kagan, a liberal Supreme Court justice, said, oh, well, so what happens, she says to Noel Francisco, who was the Solicitor General arguing for the administration, what if we had a president who didn't like Jews and said, hey, we don't want anybody from Israel coming in here? And they said, well, you have to justify it. Yeah, well, have you justified it? Well, there was a lot of laughter because she said, well, this is hypothetical out of the box. And then everybody said, yeah, well, we got a hypothetical, non-hypothetical, out-of-the-box president in Donald Trump. So everybody laughs. But I think this is not about the powers, because if it's about the powers, and I think that the conservative majority on the court is going to rule this way, if it's just about the powers, the president has the power over immigration. But in the case of this president, there's the question about religious freedom and anti-Muslim sentiment generating this ban.
But, Jesse, is it a dangerous precedent to look at what anybody might say on a campaign trail versus what they actually do as president?
Yeah, the Twitter clause. I don't know if you can use that. And he did muddy the waters with the tweets and some of the rhetoric. But like you said, on the merits, I mean, it's clear here. The president has broad authority to restrict alien coming into the country that he believes, or she believes, if it's Hillary, would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. That's clear. I mean, it should be an open and shut case on the merits, Kimberly, but, you know, they're trying to say that he's a bigot, and that's not going to fly.
They want to try to put what's in his heart, or what he thinks and imply that, like, oh, this is a guy, he's implied that he has bad motives or intentions or wants to be prejudiced, but there isn't evidence to support that.
Right. Yeah, there is. The tweets that Jesse and the speech, the remarks he made on the campaign trail.
Right, but they're not going to judge those within this context.
I don't think that's going to work.
And there have been people from some of these countries that have done harm to Americans. The guy on the Ohio State campus, I mean, he was from Somalia and rammed 11 people with his car. There was a person from, another person from Somalia that did a lot of damage. Remember the mall slasher, too? He cut up a bunch of people. He was from, I think, Sudan. So it's not like these countries are innocent countries. The president's looking at these countries. There's chaos there. There's no authority there to regulate who's leaving, who's coming, and you just want to be able to trust that process and keep Americans safe.
That's what I was going to ask to Greg, which is, like, especially if you look at Venezuela, we don't talk about Venezuela enough.
Yeah.
That is a country, it is a failed country, and of course, and there is Islamic influence happening in that country. So, like, to me, this makes sense. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, it goes back to what Jesse said. It's about lack of infrastructure and lack of process, so we have to actually supply it ourselves. All these issues have in common, and to that end, into the southern region, these are long-term considerations based on the ban and the border. These are long-term considerations based on the survival of a country, national security issues. And Trump has decided to become the bad guy and deal with it now.
Bad dad.
Yeah, he's the bad dad. It's like he wants, he's looking at a more secure border. He's worried about the marriage of technology and terror, which is why you're looking at countries that have a lack of infrastructure, which can be taken advantage of. Yeah. So what Trump is actually doing is he's saying, he's choosing all these battles that are long-term, battles that in the short term he's just going to get a lot of grief for. He's going to be seen as the mean dad.
But will really change things, though, if the court does rule in his favor and you have a Supreme Court decision, then basically then it's over. Okay, coming up, the White House still standing behind VA nominee Ronny Jackson today, despite a storm over alleged misconduct in his past. Next.
But you can't get back. Once you let it go, then you know what you have. Don't hold a candle to what you had.
The White House dismissing an onslaught of questions today about the conduct of President Trump's VA Secretary nominee, Dr. Ronny Jackson. Earlier, Sarah Sanders said Jackson's record has been impeccable, and he's received more vetting than most nominees. The president met with his pick at the White House yesterday after his confirmation hearing was postponed and said he would withdraw from consideration if he were in his shoes.
He's a fine man. I'll always stand behind him. I'd let it be his choice. But here's a man who has just been an extraordinary person. His family, extraordinary success, great doctor, great everything. And he has to listen to the abuse that he has to. I wouldn't, if I were him, actually, in many ways, I'd love to be him. But the fact is, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it.
Some senators are saying this isn't about politics, but legitimate concerns.
20-some people who got a hold of us and said, we've got a problem, this doctor has a problem, because he hands out prescriptions like candy. In fact, in the White House, they call him the candy man.
Jackson just spoke to reporters and said he doesn't know where these allegations are coming from and says he is going forward with the nomination. So we just got a whole rundown here of the allegations about Jackson. And Dana, one of the things about Candyman was that he was on Air Force One. He's handing out Ambien and things like that.
So I took a quick glance here. I want to talk about that specifically, that specific allegation, because it sounds like it's very reckless. And to me, having flown with him and also his superiors before he was the head doctor on Air Force One, when you are traveling, I think we hit 42 countries in 1 year in 2008. And in order to do your job well, the doctors would come around and ask you if you needed help being able to sleep.
Correct.
And to be able to deal with jet lag. And it was very responsible. And it's not like you were given a handful of pills. You were given a little envelope with 2 or 3 to get you through that particular trip. And I would always cut it in half so that on the back end, when I got home, I could also adjust, because I had to get up at 4 in the morning in order to help be able to do my job. So that particular thing, I think, has been mischaracterized, and unfortunately so for him. But when the president said that yesterday, when he said that I'm going to leave it up to him, I assumed that meant that he thought that Ronny Jackson was going to make the decision to not go forward, but that's not what they've decided. Right. And so these allegations that are different ones about opioids and things, I don't know anything about that. I do think that every president should be allowed to have the people that they have chosen be in the jobs that they want. If the senators don't confirm him, fine. But if they confirm him and they find out that he is not a good Secretary of the Veterans Administration, fine. And then you can judge President Trump on that pick. But I think some of these allegations feel like a little bit too far afield to prevent him from being able to have a hearing.
Yeah, some of these allegations are hard to make sense of, Greg. One of them was that he wrecked a car while drunk on the way back from a Secret Service party. He's now come out and said, I did not wreck a car. It should be pretty easy to prove that I didn't do it.
Yeah, there's, this is another, it's another example of how sudden fame becomes a game of whack-a-mole. Yep. So let's say you're leading a reasonably good life. He's the White House doc. Nobody really knows him. Some people know him. And then the spotlight comes, and it's very happy. And then all of a sudden, when the vulnerability avails itself, the press descends, and the media and the blogs, they're like culture, the vultures on a cleanse, and it ensures that there will almost be no fair hearing for this guy. You tackled the overprescribing medication bit, which I agree with. I think that is often a matter of opinion, and it hurts doctors. It makes doctors scared to prescribe because they don't want to get that reputation of being an overprescriber, of being a candy man, and that actually inevitably hurts patients, which I've talked about it with the opioid crisis. The toxic workplace thing that they're saying about him, we have to ban the word toxic. It could only be used when discussing like household cleansers and poisonous plants.
Lysol.
But a toxic workplace can be, you can throw that anywhere. If you don't like your boss, that's a toxic workplace. It's a kind of a generic phrase that people can use if they just had a miserable time at their job. Maybe he was a mean guy. I don't know. But these are like subjective emotional things. About the boozing, if they've got documentation that he's boozing heavily at work, and that's a different thing. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to make sense of the allegations.
And, oh, by the way, the media and politicians going after this guy for drinking at work is really funny.
Exactly.
Sometimes some of these senators look like they've had a few. Kimberly, I have a quote here from President Barack Obama praising Dr. Jackson. Genuine enthusiasm, great job, poised under pressure, great work ethic, inspires confidence. And now, I mean, this guy's like a quack all of a sudden.
This is really sad because the reputational smear, salacious allegations without going through some verification, some support to substantiate them. As a former prosecutor, I just take issue with that because it's not, like Dana says, if you know anything about what goes on there, and Dana does, he prescribes, he does it. Why wouldn't you listen and give weight then to the president who put in writing about him? It's not like this is just somebody that was a President Trump pick. This is somebody who has served his country admirably, faithfully, was beloved, did a wonderful job. Everybody loved him when he was doing the greatest, briefing of all time about President Trump's medical health. And then all of a sudden now, like Greg says, he's in the spotlight and he's become a high target for political reasons. Therefore, take a full and thorough investigation, make sure, because it's irresponsible to defame somebody if he's had a stellar reputation and career. And I thought that it was great to have what President Obama said about him, you know, and
Character witness right
and
there.
you know what? Kudos to President Obama for putting all that down and in writing about someone. That's what he felt, and that was his experience with him.
Well, and this guy has gone through a few background checks, an FBI background check. Nothing like these allegations ever surfaced. How do you feel about it?
Well, I'm so glad to hear this group praising President Obama, relying on President Obama.
Revel in
Really?
it. Revel
Yeah, all
in
of a sudden,
it.
President-
Revel in it.
Yeah, only when you need. I'm glad
He's
you
going to
said
put
it,
on
Jesse.
a Make America Great hat
Yeah,
tomorrow.
oh, it's too much. It's too much. That Obama.
No, he would not be an independent thinker.
Yeah, really.
And you trash Obama.
We
He's a free
need
thinker.
Obama. But you know what strikes me is I think there's something bigger at play here. You know, to my experience, when you see this kind of response coming, there are much larger forces than media or what Greg often refers to as team support politics at play. There are people within the administration of the VA who don't want a new VA secretary. They're trying to guard their power base within VA.
Yeah.
And then you have the veterans groups, and they don't like the idea that they're bringing in someone they don't know, don't have any strings on, not attached to. And then you have the military. And don't forget, Dr. Jackson was involved in a turf war with another doctor inside the White House medical office. So you have John Tester, the senator from Montana, red state, so he's not anti-Trump. And guess what? He says the people, he's had 20 military people, not political people, not media, military people come forward and say, this guy is not a good doctor, not to be trusted. And the Wall Street Journal, not any left-wing editorial page said, the president did him no favors. And where was the vetting? Where's the vetting been on so many Trump nominees? In this case, they're being surprised and put on the defensive when they need not be if they'd done their job up front.
But even though Tester's red state, he's not a Trump supporter.
Well, how about Tom Tillis from North Carolina? He said this is of concern, Kimberly.
Well,
It's going to be a tough
an
hearing
important position.
when they do get to it, if they do get to it. CNN's top White House reporter firing back at allegations he insulted the intelligence of Trump supporters. We'll play you that tape next.
Real music. Variety magazine did a big feature on CNN's chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, along with other colleagues. In it, Acosta says Americans are too clueless to see that Trump's feisty bond with the press is fake and that Trump's act will only encourage violence on people like Jim. Hence these solemn pictures, which make Jim look like hunted prey. They seem to say, here I am, out here risking my life for you to battle the great Satan Trump. Here's what he said.
People around the country don't know it's an act. They're not in on the act, and they take what he says seriously, and they take attacks from Sean Spicer and Sarah Sanders and what they do to us on a daily basis very seriously. They don't have all their faculties in some cases. Their elevator might not hit all floors. My concern is that that a journalist is going to be hurt one of these days.
Faculties. So Trump might trigger crazy Americans to go after him or Jim or others. Fair enough. Jim, feels a little like projection. You seem kind of angry yourself. Could you be a hazard to the American public? I wouldn't cut you off in traffic. Anyway, while it's true unstable people do exist, Jim misses the point that we all get. Trump creates chaos and friction from which to negotiate. He knows that he's outgunned by the media. They have all the ink. Plus, there's the bias that drips with disdainful superiority, what Jim reflects daily. So this act is something everyone wishes they could do to correct the imbalance. But ultimately, Trump treats the media the same way he treats North Korea, Iran, even Republicans. So, Jim, you're no special case. He's doing it to everyone. You just have to have the faculties to see it. And you have to be calm and professional enough to deal with it. But maybe your elevator can't reach a floor where that's possible. So we ran that tape to show you that we weren't taking his words out of context. And we're going to even I'm going to read his response on Twitter. This is Jim Acosta, or Che Acosta, as I like to call him. Regarding my interview with Variety, my comments have been twisted by some outlets. As you can plainly see, I'm not referring to Trump supporters. I'm talking about people who threaten journalists. Links to transcript and video below. Interesting. Kimberly, thoughts on this?
That was quite a dance move, a little bit of the Macarena with the electric slide thrown in, with a little bit of moonwalking, because he's like, I better push this back. Because people are like, what? Because you don't want to do what Hillary Clinton did and people then take it the wrong, you have to speak your opinion. But then if you start to insult voters or clinging to guns and religion, or you're saying that, that this is, the men and women of America can't make up their own minds. People don't like to be told they can't have their opinion or their thoughts, and for you to question their motivation or their intelligence or their understanding of the situation. Now, that being said, I mean, I like the way that was shot. It was set up nice from a production standpoint. It was almost like, okay, what is this? The news and the bold and the beautiful, whatever. I don't know. It was kind of dreamy or something. I don't know what it was. Dreamscape?
I enjoyed it.
Looked like our promo.
Yeah,
a little bit.
It was. Same people did it. So, Juan, I get the point about external threats by unstable weirdos. We all face that, but, he's not in Vietnam. I mean, he's in the White House press corps. This is his job. And, of course, when we do the 5, we get crazy people, too.
Yes,
only 1 or 2.
But I'm listening to you,
and they're from
thinking,
MSNBC.
But if you're saying that, and imagine that you're Jim Acosta and you are CNN, and you're the ones that are being driven by the president and his Twitter feed and all that, and you're asking really tough. The other day he asked a question about DACA at the Easter egg roll, and he said everybody went crazy. Or April Ryan saying that she now has law enforcement on speed dial. She gets threats for asking. The other day she asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders if Trump was thinking about quitting, and that set off. So
doesn't everybody have that on speed dial?
Okay, so if you're having that experience, can't you understand why Jim Acosta might say there are people who are unhinged?
Well, I think that's what he tried to say to justify what he was saying before.
No, I think that's what he said.
He was saying everybody's too stupid that they don't get the act.
Well, I would say that the guy that shot up a congressional Republican police game, I mean, was he inflamed by CNN? I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, Trump's going to call us fake news, so someone's going to shoot us. Well, okay, so then the guy that shot Scalise, that's your fault, Jim. I mean, I don't like that whole blame game. I mean, people are crazy, and your job is soft, Jim. You sit in a chair. You ask questions. This is not Vietnam. I mean, this is nothing. You're not under siege. Everything's fine.
With that
said, you
I
get
love
hair
Jesse
and
saying that as he's sitting at a table.
I'm not whining and complaining like I'm about to get shot. I mean, I know I have it good. And I spent a lot of years in the field, Greg.
Yes, you did. Watersworth.
And cutting tape at like 3
cutting
in the
tape
morning
in the
or
basement.
something.
But just to be fair to Jim,
we got him in the basement.
We'll look at the transcript. We can make up our own minds. But if there was a Fox News White House correspondent and he was berating Barack Obama and he was hostile and he was partisan and he was a little rude, he'd be celebrated by a lot of people in this country, but he would not get Variety magazine write-ups. Let's be honest about
it. No one will ever do that to me, Dana.
It
does seem like he's unhappy when he's there, and it's just it's like it might be a bit of a projection.
Well, it might be an act.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good job.
But this weekend is the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The president's not going. He's going to go to a rally. Katie Tur of NBC, she was on the campaign trail, and she does write about when she was in the press pen and the president was talking about the fake news media, that people that are ginned up at these rallies would go after them, not physically touch them, but they would have to be escorted out by Secret Service so that they could be protected. I think perhaps that might have been what they were referring to, and that's not good.
Yeah, I don't know. Up next, an update on that miserable professor who declared she'd never be fired after saying vile things about Barbara Bush.
We told you on Friday about Fresno State professor Randa Jarrar, who said terrible things about Barbara Bush on social media after Mrs. Bush's death. She expressed joy, in fact, that she had passed. Jarrar taunted outrage critics, saying she'd never be fired for it because she had tenure. Well, guess what? Turned out she was right. The school did a review, and President Joseph Castro put out a statement admonishing her comments. But he says, quote, "We have concluded that Professor Jarrar did not violate any CSU or university policies, and that she was acting in a private capacity and speaking about a public matter on her personal Twitter account. This private action is an issue of free speech and not related to her job or tenure. Therefore, the university does not have justification to support taking any disciplinary action." What do you make of it?
Listen, I'm for freedom of speech. People have to speak their mind, and it's a consistent theme throughout this show. However, I think that this was done in incredibly poor taste. That's my opinion. I would never do something like this. I think it's inappropriate. I think it's vile to somebody who is so respected and beloved and is, you know, a woman who lived to a great age, whose life impacted so many of us in the country and internationally, represented our country beautifully. And to besmirch her and speak about her in this despicable way, I have no bid for it or time for it whatsoever.
You know, I agree. I think there's a matter of respect and values. But on the other hand, Jesse, did you expect that she was going to be fired, that this was a violation of her rights as a tenured professor?
Well, no. Remember Ward Churchill, he said the people died on 9/11 were little Nazis. That's not what got him fired. What got him fired, they did an investigation after those comments, and they found a whole history of plagiarism and academic fraud.
Right.
That's what got him fired. So you can have freedom of speech in this country, and you're free to be a vile person. But I don't think this rises to the level. She's a nasty individual, and I hope people don't take her classes.
Yeah, well, in fact, I saw that some people said their kids aren't going to apply to go there. So maybe that'll impact the university.
I think that will.
So Dana, the professor Gerard did an interview with New York Magazine.
Of course she did.
And in the interview, she said that it was important that people not forget the history of some of the things that Barbara Bush had said, especially comments after Hurricane Katrina and the like. What do you make of this?
I make it that she is not the sliver of a woman that Barbara Bush was. And she has the right to say it. She has the right to believe what she has to believe, and I have a right to believe she is abhorrent.
Exactly.
And I guess I'll leave it at that.
No, because you knew Barbara Bush.
I did, and then Barbara Bush would say the same thing. She's got a right to say. That's why we loved Barbara Bush. Barbara Bush would be the first one to say, "Knock yourself out, sister." You want to believe that?
Bless your heart.
Out. Yeah, bless your heart. Absolutely.
So,
and come
Greg,
back with something pithy and witty about her.
And
something
Greg,
about that
I know
rose in
you
her
value differences of opinion. Does this fall into that category?
Of course. I said I didn't want her to be fired. I was more interested in the whole idea of tenure, which is proof that it's often for losers, because tenure allows people not to actually have to be any good, and she also has more rights than the students because she has tenure. She's protected, but this is a very sick, sad, lonely woman who finds comfort in other people's sorrow. So you can bet whatever punishment that you could dream of for her can't be worse than her own life.
Yeah.
Because living in that person's skin has to be just everyday self-loathing. And Barbara Bush will accomplish more no longer living than this idiot will in her lifetime. I hope she goes on Tucker.
Do you know that tenure is the safe space for the professor?
Yeah, it's a safe space for professors.
You can say whatever. You're safe. You can say whatever you want.
Yeah.
And the students don't want to hear any of it.
Yeah.
Well,
Tucker would have fun, right?
I think
she's on Tucker tonight.
I think tenure is supposed to be about expanding our base of knowledge, not protecting ugly speech.
But that's not how they use it.
That's not the way we're. All right. But guess what? We have rainy day fun. One more thing is up next.
We're going on the rain. Well, it's time now for one more thing. Dana.
All right, so today is World Malaria Day, and it's a day to celebrate global efforts to help eradicate the disease. It affects billions of people. The good news is the President's Malaria Initiative released its 12th annual report today. So far, the U.S. has helped save 7 million lives and prevented 1 billion malaria cases since 2000. The hope is that one day foreign assistance won't be necessary, but the American people have done a lot of great work, and it continues under President Trump. So we have a great deal to do, but we've done a lot already, so we want to celebrate that today.
All right, Dana, thank you for that. And Jesse, what do you have for us today?
So yesterday you saw Dana and I were down in Nashville, Tennessee. Celebrity waiters, actually. Well, she was the celebrity. I was just tagging along.
Yeah, right.
It was a star-studded event, and it was called Waiting for Wishes, which raised money for two great causes, the Kevin Carter Foundation and the Make-A-Wish for Middle Tennessee. A lot of fun and an honor to be there. And tomorrow we're going to show you some behind-the-scenes action.
This is how Jesse waited tables while I was bussing tables.
I was buttering her roll, Dana.
Oh.
That's what we were. Well, that's what we were asked to do. And it was for a very good cause.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome,
Jesse, and for donating your time and volunteering with Dana. It was very sweet.
Thank you.
All right, Juanito.
Well, you know, Gregory usually has the funny animal videos for you, but today I have Angry Bird, or should I say Angry Mother Goose.
Oh, my God.
Take a look at these photos from Adrian, Michigan. Yes, that's an angry mother goose attacking a golfer. He came too close to the bird's nest. Isaac Cooling, the high schooler participating in the golf tournament, got turned upside down, even lost his golf clubs while under assault. It took 4 golf carts to separate the young man and the goose, but the golfer says he still shot par. Well, I guess it wasn't a birdie, certainly not an eagle, maybe a goose. How about that for simple
Very
jokes?
good.
That's a very good one. I like that one.
See, I was trying to impress Dana.
All right. Well, so I want to take a special moment here for my dear friend. We came in together at the Fox News Channel almost like 12 years ago. Ainsley Earhardt, who's the co-host of Fox and Friends in the Morning. This is her fantastic new inspirational memoir talking about her life, and I've gotten to know her and her family well and her daughter. And it's really something, a woman of faith. Her religion is very important to her. You've heard her talk about that and Be Brave. It's called The Light Within Me, and it talks about her family and how she was raised growing up in South Carolina, her relationship with God, and a strong influence. So, and also tomorrow, President Trump will be calling into Fox and Friends with Ainsley and Brian and Steve at 8 a.m. for an interview. You don't want to miss that.
Wow.
Okay, Greg?
Excellent. All right, if you go to foxnews.com,